The following is a presentation of the Eagles Sports Network.
Welcome into episode 21 of Mossy Creek Conversation. I'm Danielle Whaley, and I'm ecstatic to be joined today by former Carson Newman swimmer, All-American swimmer at that, and current football dietitian for Coastal Carolina, Maggie Melhorn. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and working around my schedule.
Yeah, I feel like it's a busy time of year. You're getting into football season. We're getting to the season's here for the fall. Finally getting back to some fall sports. I feel like it's been so long, but we're going to use this time, take a little trip down memory lane, enjoy this time, and look back at your time as an Eagle. But before we get to that, I want to go back before you were an Eagle. What was it that drew you into becoming a swimmer?
Honestly, it was kind of by mistake. Well, I wouldn't say mistake, but when I was younger, I did gymnastics and I had a lot of ankle issues. So I had to give up gymnastics, and somehow ankle issues turned into, oh yeah, tennis makes sense. So I went and I played tennis for 2 years and I still had ankle problems. And so then I eventually found my way to swimming, started swimming. During my first or second year of swimming, found out what was wrong with my ankle, got that fixed and solved, and then I kind of ended up just sticking with it. And when you're a high school, like year-round swimmer, you've got at least 3 morning practices where you're waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get to practice. And I remember my junior year of high school, I told my mom, I was like, if I've spent the past 3 years waking up at 4:30 in the morning to not do this in college, I was like, I've wasted so much time. So at that point, I was kind of determined, like I was going to keep swimming no matter what, because I'd woken up so early for so long.
It's definitely, I feel like, a journey that you have to go through. I mean, long days, trying to really refine your craft and everything. But whenever you were growing up, you're from Knoxville, you're from the area, you were in the, correct me if I'm wrong, the Knox Area Interscholastic Swim League. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
We're going to say that's correct.
I could be wrong about that too, but Knoxville area, yes.
Knoxville area, but there was a certain record that you broke while you were swimming. I want to say it was one that lasted, it had stood for about 9 years or so. I want to say that it was in the 100 breaststroke. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was like our high school city meet, Knoxville. I think it's at Knoxville Interscholastic. I think the abbreviation was like KISL.
KISL, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But yes, 100 breaststroke.
Yeah. So you broke that record. What was that moment kind of like for you? Because I'm assuming it was right before you were gearing up to, start your collegiate career. Was that kind of like a point where you thought, okay, maybe we can get something going at the college level?
Yeah. So that happened in my senior year. It was, I believe, the night that I broke that record was the night that I talked to Paige McCord, the head swim coach at Carson Newman my first 2 years. That was the night I called her and I actually accepted to come and swim for Carson Newman. So I think in that moment, it was kind of a big confidence boost for me. And just the fact of like, oh, wow, because there was always like a lot of mental hurdles and just kind of the confidence in my swimming. So that was a big moment where I just kind of overcame something. I remember at the time I credited it to the fact that before finals, when I broke the record, my dad let me get Starbucks and Chick-fil-A for dinner going into finals. And I told him that that's what it was. And so from then on out, I was like, I have to have Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. That did not continue through. I didn't keep with that trend, but I do remember that in particular. Talking to Paige and then those two things. So
I feel like that's a combination of champions right there. We could say that your whole collegiate career was built off of Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. I think that's a winning combo.
Tell me something that's like more like Southern girl than that. Like, I don't know.
I think that's a great combo. I'm a fan of both, so I'm gonna say that was a great choice on your part to kind of stick with that is what really pushed you on that. I think that's great. So aside from the Starbucks and the Chick-fil-A, what was it that drew you to coming to Carson Newman? I'm sure those two things didn't really play a big part in you saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to Carson Newman. What was it that put Carson Newman on your radar?
Honestly, I hadn't. So when my freshman year was the second year of the swim program. So Carson Newman really, truly wasn't on my radar when I first started looking for colleges. I had a friend from the Knoxville area, Samantha Starnes. She had committed and she was a freshman my senior year of high school. So I went up and visited and I stayed with her. And she was just someone that I really looked up to at the time. And I just really enjoyed my visit, had a really great time. My phone conversations with Paige were really great. And I really liked the idea of being a part of something so new, and really being able to kind of help grow a program, start a program, put it on the map. That is something that was really big that drew me in.
And I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit. You know, it was so early on for the swim program whenever you did join on and be an Eagle. And you kind of spoke on this a little bit, but how did that motivate you to really put out your best every time you were in the pool to try to, make a name, not just for yourself, but for the entire swim program as a whole at Carson Newman?
I think it just gives you like a different sense of pride that, like, I know, like, even now I'm able to look back and know that, like, I was part of the very beginning stages of that program, and being able to keep up with the success that it has now. I'm never going to stand here and say, like, oh, that's because of me or that's because of my class or anything like that. But it's like, I really had like one of those foundational parts in building that program and creating it to where it is today. So that's just something unique and not everyone ever gets to say.
I think that's huge. There's been a lot of success, like you talked about, with the program. A lot of All-American swimmers that we've seen. But I wanna go through the Melhorn Files, as I want to call it, really quickly. We're gonna go through your accolades. Just let me have this moment for a second. So in your 4-year career, 4-time All-American, both in individuals and with some relays that we're gonna be talking about some relays later on. 10 honorable mention All-American swims, 17 All Bluegrass Mountain Conference awards. You reset numerous records along the way. Did you ever anticipate going into Carson Newman thinking you're gonna have that kind of success at all?
Absolutely not.
No.
Not at all. I don't think even I can, like, walking on campus, I never would have thought I would accomplish close to any of that. And I think that just kind of attributes to the team, the coaching staff, and just the overall, like, culture that was there. Like, all of us will say that there was something special at Carson Newman, and it's kept us bonded, and, it kept us there fighting all 4 years. And I think that's really where I attribute a lot of my success.
Whenever you look at the success that you have, I think it's safe to say a lot of that really took a spearhead turn in your sophomore campaign. That's whenever your first All-American swim happened. It was in the 800 free relay. You had the likes of Nancy Claire Smith with you, Lexi Raybon, Margaret Stansberry. What was it like being able to, have that moment with them where you all are winning an All-American, and the time for that still stands as a program record today in that event? What was that moment like for you?
Honestly, like, sometimes when you have such a great race, you don't remember a lot of it. Yeah. So, like, in the race itself, I don't remember a ton, but afterwards, I mean, we all still talk about just kind of the magic in that moment to this day. Like, it was a great swim. All 4 of us, like, just had so much fun on the relay. Like, we were always joking behind the blocks. That's one of the best things about relays, is you've got 3 of your best friends with you. So you're not just swimming by yourself. You're not just thinking about swimming for your team. You've got these people next to you, and you're like, I'm diving in this pool and I'm going to not breathe coming into the flag, so that I don't know who came off of me on that relay, but whoever dives off of me on that relay, like, gets the stroke count right. Like, it's just little things like that that all add up, and really made that relay.
You talk about the little bit of like a family that you have there with your relay, but especially for you, Margaret and Lexi, you guys came into Carson Newman at the exact same time. You all became All-Americans throughout your 4 years. What was it like building that bond with them and the rest of the team, but especially with that core, since you guys went through everything together in those 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think what speaks to that the most is still to this day how much I reflect and like miss having them around all the time. I FaceTimed Margaret actually this past Sunday, and we were just talking about, like, we'll send each other like memories on Snapchat, and it's just like I took for granted all the times that I would just pop in, because she was my roommate in the dorms my sophomore year, how many times I would just like look at her and be like, I need to go get groceries at Walmart. You want to come with me? And now I'm going to Walmart by myself to get groceries, and it's just not the same.
It's funny how times change. I mean, All-Americans go to Walmart too to shop for groceries. That's how it is in swimming.
It's just the bonding in the pool. It's the bonding out of the pool. Like, you were around each other all the time, and sometimes that drove you crazy, but 95% of the time it didn't, because they were your family. They are your family.
Exactly. And you talk about bonding. There's something I debated if I wanted to bring it up, but I think I need to. I think one point of bonding that happens with the swim program here has to be the orange-blue inter-squad meet that happens. There's a little bit of competition in there between the men and the women, but for both squads, on the men's side and the women's side, how big is that bond within the family, and even having those moments where you do have to compete against each other? Yeah,
I mean, I think we always did a good job of making sure that, like, okay, when we like race against each other, like, it's competitive, but then you still have like mid-distance group is like a tight-knit group. Even though we're split up on like orange and blue, we'd have men's practices and women's practices. So you would have like your specific like gender group, but then that would be mixed up when you're in mid-distance. So like it was always so woven in practices and like lifting and all of that, that even if you were competing, I don't know, you could turn it on and off when you were competing and when you weren't. Like, you could go up and talk smack, and then you would be like, all right, but like, let's break down this race. And like, I remember Josh Terrell and I would always talk about like 200 breaststroke, and like, okay, we had totally different race strategies for our 2 breast, but we trained for it together all the time, that we could be like, yeah, like, I see where you're coming from, and like, that's good for you, but like, I can finish like hard, so like I don't need to do this, and I don't know, just different things like that.
It's a lot of different things. I think the competition that's there, it's good competition to have, and it really gets you ready for, you know, the meets and the swims that are really going to mean a lot.
Yeah.
I think looking at, you know, we talked about there was a lot of success in that sophomore year. Your freshman year, there was still success there. You were breaking records, setting new standards. But whenever you get into that sophomore season, you had 12 event wins throughout that season. You had the All-American. What do you think clicked from year 1 to year 2 that really got you moving forward?
Honestly, I think I just matured a bit.
Yeah.
I think I was a naive kind of freshman, big eyes, going off to college. I was homeschooled my entire life up until college. So, I mean, I think that was a big change for me too. But I think it's just being new, being on campus, you're figuring out classes, you're figuring out practice, you're figuring out a new team, friend groups. Everything is so new. And I think my sophomore year, I just finally was able to be like, here's how I prioritize, here's how I get it all done. When I go to practice, I turn everything off except for practice, and all kind of that. I think that's really the big difference.
Was there a point that season where you look at all the competitions that you took part in, where you really kind of saw a turning point, where you saw that, you know, you could become a true competent leader for the rest of the team as you were getting ready to take on, you know, your junior and senior years?
I don't know if one necessarily comes to mind. For me, I feel like that happened. I know there was one race. We had one dual meet. I can't remember if it was my sophomore or junior year though, but we had a dual meet where I dealt with a lot of just like race stress, anxiety, and 200 breaststroke was arguably one of my best events, and I raced it at a dual meet, and it was the first time that I was able to race it and actually race it like I meant it. And I got out of the pool, and I remember like I just like started crying, and I went up to Jordan Taylor, and like he knew the clicking point for me. And I remember my dad was also there, and I went up to him and I was crying. And so I know that particular moment was a clicking point for me of like, I can do this. Yeah. But I can't remember, we were at home, but I don't remember if it was sophomore or junior year. But for me, I know that was the turning point. Time-wise, no clue when it was.
As long as there was a turning point where, really kind of paved the way for you, where you thought, this is my chance to really step in and, not just be strong for myself, but be a strong force, I guess you could say, for the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Up until that point, who were you looking up to on the team? I mean, you were coming into a very new program, as you had already mentioned, we had talked about that, but there were still some upperclassmen. Was there somebody that you were kind of looking at as like, I'm going to, try to be just as good as them, whether they were at Carson Newman or just another swimmer in general, that you wanted to try to be as good as?
I honestly took different aspects from every teammate.
Yeah.
I would say, if anything, I looked up to Jordan Taylor. He was my particular distance coach. He was my mid-distance coach, and he helped me a lot with breaststroke. He wrote like a thesis, all sciencey, on the breaststroke pull down. And at the time, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I was like, I gotta listen to this man, and thank goodness I did. But so swimming wise, I looked up to him and everything he said a lot. Also just life advice in general. Great coach. But I think when it came down to the team, like every one of my teammates was always somebody else. Like I took something from someone and learned from it. I don't know if there's necessarily anyone in particular that I ever really looked up to, took advice from. It was more just as a whole.
I think it's good
Which I think is a really great thing as a team when you're able to pull from so many people.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. I feel like that's kind of what makes a team, where everybody has their strong suits, but that individual strong suit is what's going to help push the team forward in some sort of way. Yeah. For you, what do you think that strong suit for you was that helped you kind of pave the way? I know you said the 200 breast was definitely your strongest in your sophomore campaign, but what do you look back at and kind of consider your pivotal point?
I don't know.
It's a tough question.
My pivotal point, I think it would have been my junior year at nationals. In the 2 breast, in prelims, I placed 9th place by 0.03 of a second. Wow. And in order to be individual AllAmerican, you had to place top 8 in prelims. So I missed out by 0.03 of a second. I dropped a lot of time that morning. And then I came back at finals and reset. I dropped more time. And time standard wise, I placed 3rd overall at nationals. But technically I still placed 9th. So for me, I really took that as a pivotal point because I was able to separate. I gave myself 5 minutes to be mad about it, 5 minutes to think, everyone's out to get me. Whoa, my life is so hard. And then I was like, all right, get back in the pool and kick some butt. So that's what I did. And then when I finished, I was like, hey, I can do this. I've got one more season up ahead of me. I'm going after it. And I remember the summer going into my senior year, everything I took seriously. I was full on training mode, very goal driven. and luckily it paid off. But so that was like a big pivotal point for me, was, I don't want to say being taught like a hard lesson, but having to deal with something like that, especially when it's 300ths of a second.
But those 300ths of a second can mean so much. And for you, they meant getting 3 All-Americans in that final season, which I think you said it paid off. I think it paid off in the best way possible. But that junior year, you still had 4, I think it was 4 honorable mention All-Americans. So it's still pretty stout right there to have 4. But
yeah.
And you had, I want to say, a team high 9 events, that event wins that season as well. So there were still those successes where it may not have been how you wanted it to end up with that 300ths of a second, but you were still able to make the most of that junior campaign. But you head into that senior campaign, and whenever you talk about people going off into the sunset on the highest horse possible, I think Maggie Melhorn could be the definition of that with what you accomplished in that senior year. You became the program's first 2-time bronze medalist at the NCAAs that year. What was that feeling like, getting bronze in those individual events?
It was pretty great. I mean, I was super happy with both of my races. I really felt like, I'm going to quote one of my previous interviews, that I left it all in the pool. But I do remember after my last race, I started to critique myself. I went up to Jordan, Coach Taylor, and I was like, I think to cut those last couple of seconds off and get to this time, like, this is what I need to do. And he just like put his hand on my shoulder and he was like, that was the last time you were racing it. But to that, I was able to achieve my goals and swim to how I'd been training and then some. I mean, I don't think that meet could have turned out any better than it did. I'm really happy with the way my career in swimming ended. Sad to see it go, but it ended in very much of riding off in the sunset.
And you talk about that final. You were happy with how it turned out. Was there one point there where you just kind of took a step back, took it all in, and thought, this is going to be it for me? Like, how do I make the most of it?
Honestly, I was kind of afraid to do that. It made me really nervous to think about that, like, I was about to be done. And so the trick that I used to have to like calm my nerves down was, before walking out for finals, I would stand back where we like lined up and I just started yawning. Like, I would just constantly yawn. And it was just a way for me to like calm down. And I told Coach Taylor that it was also a way for me to psych out my competitors, because I was like, this is nothing. Like, I race this all the time. So I didn't really let myself think about the fact that it was the last time I was going to race. And instead, I just tried to stay in the moment and be like, all right, like, hanker down, like, get in there, do what you came here to do.
To get 2 individual All-Americans that year is one thing, but to get another All-American, I should say, in the relay, what was it like to be able to get yet another one? You had one in 2016, and then you came back and did it again in 2018. What was that like?
That was by far the most exciting one, and that was just because of the relay. It got to be with Lisa Postman, Ellie Culp, Margaret Stansberry. Like, that was one of my most fun relays of college. We always had a blast. Like, if you watch any of our walkout videos, they're hysterical. We always dabbed before our race. And I just couldn't have been like more happy to have gotten that than with them.
Do you think that the dabbing is what actually helped elevate you?
100%. There's no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely.
That's like my high school race where it was Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. It was the dabbing in college with them.
Of course it was. So whenever you look at the relay squads for Carson Newman over the years, there's been so much success bringing in numerous All-Americans. For you, you kind of touched on this earlier. What did it mean to you to be able to kind of set the tone, I guess you could say, for future relay teams at Carson Newman, kind of setting that standard and that tone for them?
Yeah, I think a big thing that I remember always kind of imparting was just having fun with it. Like really letting them know, like, you're going out there and you're racing as hard as you can. Yes, but it is so much more enjoyable when you go up behind the block and you're having fun. Like I remember anytime any of us were feeling nervous, we'd be like, snap out of it. Ellie and I would always be listening to music together because we always had like the same songs that we were listening to, and we would do the goofiest like dances. And it was just to get your mind off of the fact that like, okay, like, yeah, we're getting behind the blocks. It's a little bit nervous. We know when we got on the block, it was go time, you could race. But leading up to it, it was like, let's keep the nerves down and not think about it and have fun.
Out of all the relay teams that you got to be with, if you could swim one more relay with a group, who would be on your ultimate relay team?
I mean, it would have to be them. Like, that's just like the funnest group. I don't know if funnest is a word, most fun group.
I think it's a good group.
Nothing can beat it. Like, truly nothing can beat it. We just always had a blast. There wasn't ever a time that we let ourselves get nervous because we were always like snapped like out of it and just like made a joke, did something silly. So I don't know. It was great. And we were all swimming our best like stroke. So it was fun.
Absolutely. And for you yourself, you know, there were numerous times that you were able to set records and set program best still with those relays. You're still at the top of the list for numerous individual ones that you've had. Whenever you look back at your career, what do you consider to be your standout accomplishment?
That is a tough question. I honestly think, I really think it would be that moment that I talked about that I have no idea what meet it was at. So it's funny that it's my biggest accomplishment and I don't remember, but that was like the biggest mental block that I had. But since I can't remember any details of it, I'll go to my second. And I really truly think it was the finals race at nationals my junior year, just because I felt like it was a lot of character building for me. Kind of being knocked down and not letting it get to me that, I mean, just the title of individual All-American, yeah, it's there. But when it comes down to it, I dropped time. I dropped time in prelims and I was able to drop time again in finals. And Coach Taylor was proud of me. I was proud of myself. And that's really all that mattered at the end of the day. But I think that had a lot of character building for me, and it really kicked my butt into prime time for my senior year. So since that's the one I can remember details from, I'll go with that one.
I think that's just as good. If that's your backup, I'm impressed. Say no more. That's a good backup. Taking away the individual side, looking at a team-wide view, what made you the proudest about being a part of the swim team?
I think it's any time we had a really challenging practice. So probably particularly in like the Christmas season, everyone would leave campus and we'd be there at least probably another week and a half. And we would have some really hard practices, doubles all the time. And it's just the energy and kind of the goofy, fun attitude that we were still able to bring that really always made me proud and like put a smile on my face, because there's times like you're like, all right, like I don't want to jump into the cold pool at 6 a.m. when no one else is here and like everyone's home for Christmas. But when your teammates make it worth it, those are moments that like I'll always look back on.
How would you say, both in the pool and out of the pool, that Carson Newman shaped you into who you are today?
I think a lot of it has to do with kind of that character building I talked about. I think it just taught me, I think swimming in general taught me to be very disciplined, but also onto that, like just the relationship building. opening up, building relationships with your teammates, with your coaches, to see how much that's translated, especially into my job. It's very transferable. And so for me, that's been like a big building of who I am, and I would attribute to my success in my career just from the team aspect.
And you're still early in your career too. And I think your career is one of the most under talked about parts of the sports world. Nutrition, dietetics is huge whenever it comes to sports. So for you, you graduated from Carson Newman in 2018 for your bachelor's degree. I think it was food, nutrition, and dietetics, I think is what
Yes.
the actual title was. And then you went to Auburn for your master's. What was that experience like? You know, you started working with teams there in Auburn athletics. How was that going from, you know, being a student athlete to now working with student athletes to get real world experience for your job?
Yeah, so there was like a year gap in between. I had to do some more schooling. However, I would say the transition was still about the same. I have to still sometimes stop myself from not trying to be a mom and being like, well, like, don't take this for granted. Like, senior year is going to come so much faster than you think. So I do have to stop myself sometimes, but I do think it helps when I'm able to sit with, and I'm meeting with a student athlete. I'm able to sit down and be like, listen, I know schedules are crazy. Like, give me what your practice schedule looks like. Give me what your class schedule looks like. And let's figure out how you're going to be able to like optimize your recovery and fuel throughout the day based on that. And like, all right, what do we need to prepare the night before? What are some convenient things to have on hand? I think having that understanding of truly like, I know at the end of the day of having classes and practices, you're not going to go home and make dinner. I am not naive to that. Like, I've been there, I've done that. I've told myself that lie. So I think having truly that understanding of being a student athlete and kind of what it's like, the challenges, the benefits that coming with being a student athlete, I think it makes me relatable, and they know that I'm empathizing with them, but it also helps me to understand where they're at and how I can best help them with it.
What made you want to pursue a career in nutrition? Because I think that's such, like I mentioned, it's such a unique field to want to go into.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I had a lot of GI issues, so stomach issues. And my mom and I just changed, like, my mom did a lot of research. We changed a couple of things in my diet, helped clear stuff up. And I just remember in that moment thinking, like, it's so crazy how everyone's body uses foods differently or reacts to foods differently. And that's kind of what initially sparked my interest. And then once I was in my core nutrition classes, I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I can get behind this science, because I'm a science person, but too much chemistry, I'm like, over my head. Organic chemistry 1 was enough for me. But then I started researching more into sports nutrition. And when I talked about being more kind of serious about my training going into my senior year, I kind of did some self-application of things that I had like read in different position papers and different sports nutrition textbooks. And I would also attribute that to kind of the success that I saw in my senior year. And so for me, having had that success in my senior year, my thing is I always want to go back and be like, all right, I want to give back and I want to help another student athlete achieve that earlier on and not at the end of their career. So that's kind of what's driven me.
How do you think that you touched on this a little bit with your experiences, but how do you think your collegiate career has really helped you to really hone in on your skill set with this career path?
I think a lot of it is kind of what we talked about. It's knowing how busy a student athlete is, knowing, the pressures that they're getting from their team, from their coaches. Honestly, in these days, like the amount of pressure coming from social media, taking that into effect, as well as just all right, going to like the dining hall, there's always going to be something wrong with it. Every dining hall, no dining hall is perfect because it's not reading your mind and what you want to eat at that particular time. So being able to take in all of those personal experiences and knowing just how exhausted you are at the end of the day, and sometimes it's like I'd rather go to sleep and not eat, and being able to, for me now in my point, being able to break down the science of like proper recovery nutrition and why that would be important, translating it to a student athlete easily, and then being like, I know you would rather sleep, trust me, I get it, let's put this together really quickly and then you can go to bed, you can do your homework and go to bed. So I think it's really just the overall, having this overall student athlete experience is just a huge skill set.
And you're wearing the shirt, so we have to talk about it. You're at Coastal Carolina now, repping there. You are the dietitian for the football team. What has that transition been like? I mean, you started in early August. You're now getting into the football season. What has this whole process been like for you?
Yeah, so it's been kind of a crazy but not crazy process at the same time. So I'm the first sports dietitian at Coastal Carolina University. So it's been like a big transition in that sense. And then I'm football only, which is something that I've always wanted to kind of pursue. But I'm pretty much immediately coming in, I had about 2 weeks transition of starting, and then we got into fall camp, which if anyone knows is just like a beast of its own. But truly, that's been kind of the biggest blessing in disguise, because it's been like forced fun time with the team and coaches. Like, they have no opportunity to get away from me. Like, they have to deal with me. And so it's been really great. I've been learning so many names and faces. I have like a little printout sheet. I don't have it at my desk with me, but I printed out the entire roster, and I met with all of our players, and I forced them to give me a fun fact and their favorite foods, just to help like identify everyone differently. We were fueled by fruit snacks through fall camp.
As we all should be.
Biggest hit. But it's been super fun. The guys are really great. It reminds me a lot of Carson Newman, just kind of the family experience. So in that sense, it's been a super easy transition. They've welcomed me with open arms. I never expected them to not, but it's been like kind of a dream come true. It's been a very easy transition.
Easy transitions are good, but with football, you have a huge roster that you're working with, as with most football teams. How many sports have you worked with up until this point, and what has been probably the most favorite sport that you've gotten to be with?
So at Auburn, I was the sports dietitian for our volleyball, softball, men's and women's tennis, men's and women's swim and dive program, and then I assisted with football. At Auburn, I can't really pick a favorite team. I love them all for different reasons. So I really can't pick. I couldn't. They all have like their own thing, and like I'm excited. Auburn's volleyball team has their first match this week, so I'm excited to watch them from afar. But at Coastal, I can tell you that football is my favorite team.
It's an easy one to pick as your favorite.
Yeah, not biased then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before I let you go, I want to wrap up with one thing. You are 3 years removed now from your time at Carson Newman. You've kind of mentioned it. You're still you're being a mom to these players now in some ways, telling them, hey, keep an eye on what you're eating and what you're doing, but you're still kind of living that college life in some ways, because you're with student athletes day in and day out. Whether it be a student athlete at Carson Newman, someone at Auburn, or at Coastal that you're working with, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a student athlete that's going through their collegiate career and getting ready to go into the real world like you've done?
Good question. I mean, is it just like,
There's a lot of advice you could give.
I know, and that's what I'm trying to think. I'm like, what area is best to give? I would say, truly, I think my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to ask for help. That's something I've always just liked to handle things myself and never ask for help. But truly, like, don't ask for help, whether it's from a family member, a friend, a colleague, just asking advice on, whatever area is causing difficulty in that transition, whether it's, just having a hard time no longer being able to identify with a sport, whether it's, okay, now I don't have a dining hall, how am I supposed to cook, from a nutrition aspect, or if it's figuring out life. Like, everyone's always figuring out life. I remember when I thought I'd hit this age, life would be so sorted out, and I am so wrong, but I couldn't be happier with my life. But like, everyone's always figuring out life. So I don't know, don't ever like hold yourself back from asking a question. There are no dumb questions. So
I love that point. There are no dumb questions. I feel like that's a huge key for life, and I think that's something that a lot of people can hold on to. But Maggie, it has been wonderful catching up and going down memory lane and just catching up on everything that you've done since you've left Carson Newman.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Good. I'm so glad. Well, thank you so much for joining, and thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Mossy Creek Conversations. She's Maggie Melhorn. I'm Danielle Whaley. We'll see you next time on Mossy Creek Conversations.